I've been thinking about this for several months, and I've personally reached out because a lot of these people are my personal friends. I have good relationships and bonds with them, but I don't know why I feel like I was like, oh, I want to make a video about this. And I just think it's like, of course, I'm not here to tell people what to do, but I think I would like to encourage people, especially athletes or families and friends of our athletes, to reach out and thank your promoters for the bodybuilding shows, because I think why it's so apparent to me right now is watching all of this insanity in our sport shifting these shows still. Like, if you think about this entire year, I was fortunate enough to be at the Arnold when it happened in March. The unfortunate part was watching the limitations unfold, like in the midst of when this all started. The cool thing that I got to see was the fight to put on the show anyway. And while the spectators weren't able to attend, it was really cool to watch the people of our organization, the officials, the promoters, everybody fought and did what they could to make the show go. And while we couldn't have like a full room of an audience, it still happened in March. I had a client in that show, and 48 hours before her event, we were like, oh my gosh, what if it gets canceled? We have no idea what. Like, I've never had to make that kind of a phone call in my coaching career to say, hey, I don't know if your show's going to happen in 48 hours, but it did. So she got to have that closure with her prep, and as her coach, I got to see her sort of see her on that stage, and that was kind of scary because we were just like, oh, what if it didn't happen? And she did really well. And so that was back in March, and immediately after that, all of our shows got canceled through, what was it, July, I think. And I mean, that alone is something like you could never, ever prepare for. I don't care who you are. Nobody thought 5, 10, 20 years ago, oh, how would I make a bodybuilding show in the middle of a world pandemic when it's affecting us in this way? So nobody had practice for this. Nobody has a handbook for this. The hard part, too, is I talk with a lot of our promoters on a personal level and not just in a business sense, and I could feel their frustrations having to deal with what they've been handed, and a lot of the promoters kind of felt like their hands were tied. And so it's just like, they want to put the show on, but I don't know, there were so many factors to consider that I couldn't imagine being in their position. And so, like, I actually reached out to them and sent them a text and was like, hey, I don't know exactly what you're going through, but I support you in whatever you're dealing with. And so whether a show happened or not, that was still a big toll on a promoter. And if it didn't happen, I'm sure there was not just like the mental and emotional loss, but that's scary. It's a business. So not only is it a business, it's like you've got, if athletes are returning customers, you want to take care, it's customer service. And some promoters really had no choice. And so, like, just in having to write these emails and these messages and post on social media and all the backlash and all the negative comments that I saw, like, that kind of frustrated me. And another thing that frustrated me was some of these promoters, out of the goodness of their heart, made free live streams so that nobody had to pay to watch the shows on, like, Facebook Live or however they could do it. And if the connection was bad or the volume was bad or whatever, people were complaining about it. And I'm like, are you nuts? Like, they didn't have to do that. They wanted to do that. They wanted to do that for the athletes. They want to take care of the athletes. And then everybody watching for free who did not pay was like, oh, this sucks. And what's funny? The athletes weren't complaining. The people who actually stepped on stage weren't complaining. The ones who were suffering and the ones who were worried and nervous that the show might not go on at all didn't complain one bit. They got up there and they appreciated being able to compete. So I just thought that was ridiculous. I try to keep my mouth shut because I try to be nice and professional sometimes. But I don't know, like, it's been amazing to see what people are doing and what they're making happen. We had, North Americans shifted into a bodybuilding show in a tent outside, and I'm pretty sure like that was the weekend that it was like windy or stormy or something. So it's like, it's really cool to see the lengths that people are going to and the creativity to say like, well, here are the rules, here's what we can do to keep everybody safe, to make things happen, and to take care of the athletes and do what's absolute best. And it's been nice to see that, like, after all of these years, that the promoters are taking every possible solution to take care of our athletes. And it's not about business. It's about heart, and it's about integrity, and it's about passion of the sport. And I love that. I think that's something I'm really proud about my bodybuilding industry, is to say like, yeah, well, there are people who care and who will bend over backwards, even if they take a hit. And not everybody's ungrateful. You know, there's a lot of people who are reaching out, and I see it. They say thank you and we appreciate you. I encourage more of that because, again, I couldn't imagine what they're dealing with. And so, gosh, like all these shows, not just with the date changes, but the location changes. Like, you don't think about things like the venues, the host hotels, it's stressful on everybody. And I know it's an inconvenience to have to move like that, but it's just me speaking from a competitive standpoint. I don't care where the show goes on. I don't care if there's an audience. I just want to get up there. And I hear these awesome stories about back in the day when people competed on a basketball court with a light hanging down from the basketball goal and with a sheet in the background, and that was a bodybuilding show. And honestly, I wouldn't be mad at that. If that's how it went down, I would be like, okay, here we go. So it's a luxury, and it's a blessing to have the opportunity to get on stage at any point in time. And that's why, like, if you've been on stage this year, that's a blessing. Not just because you made things work, like you did that, but also there's the opportunity, because sometimes it's easier to say, we're not going to have a bodybuilding show. And putting it on anyway is the hardest thing to do, and they do it anyway. And it's like, okay, well, now you have a place to go do what you love. So I don't care how cheesy it sounds, and I just think it's important. I think it's very important to show gratitude for the people who are making things happen and making things go. And not only am I an active competitor in the IFBB, I'm a coach. And so, like, that means all of my athletes have opportunities to still get on stage. And that weighs really heavy on me. Like, the phone calls I've had to make this year to say, I'm sorry your show was canceled. Like, again, there was no school, there was no experience, there was no time before this that could prepare me to feel the way that I felt when I had to make those phone calls. And then the athletes that I was able to get on stage because the opportunity was there, we soaked up every minute of it. We absorbed every minute of it. We maximized what we could, and we rolled with the punches, and we adapted, and it's fun. It's fun to say, okay, here's a challenge, let's take it on. And I'm very proud of all of my athletes and the way that they've handled this, not just on and off stage. The people who are returning now, like the people who didn't get to compete earlier in the year, and now they're kind of saying like, okay, we're ready to go again. So that means that something came together in a way that they're still having a good experience. And I do think that the promoters are a big part of that. One of the most insane things to me right now is, I don't know, I'm sure people have seen, keep this in mind. What is today? I don't know what the date is, like maybe the November 20th. So they moved the Olympia from September to December to do what they could for the athletes, to make it fair, to make it reasonable, and to do what was going to be best for everybody given the circumstances. So they moved they moved the date already, and I don't know if they moved the venue initially because that may have happened that may have been going to happen regardless of Corona. I think that was in the works before this, but I could be wrong. So they moved the date, they moved the venue originally to from the Orleans to the Planet Hollywood, and just yesterday or the day before, so less than 1 month of our Super Bowl, the biggest bodybuilding production in the world, in our sport, got moved in location from Las Vegas to Orlando, which is a completely different area. Like, to me, that's just mind-blowing, that you can take a production so big and something so important and so delicate. There's so many parts and so many pieces and components of the Olympia even functioning. I mean, I'm so impressed. I'm so impressed that people can pull together on their connections and say, well, this might not work out, so what can we do? And they just, like, almost overnight, they're making phone calls, they're making, like, adjustments, and they're securing completely new venues that no one's been at. I watched the Olympia team go fly out to all these different venues to meet and check things out in advance. And it seems like they're kind of keeping all of the Olympians very prepared in that sense. So, like, what a comfort for these Olympians to say, you know what, I think they've got it. They'll make sure that I know what to do or where to go. And so that to me is something that's just so incredible and so amazing. So no, you're going from state show promoters, NPC promoters, all the way up through nationals, NPC. You've got like IFBB Pro shows, and then you have the elite IFBB and amateur Olympia. And I say, like, all the promoters deserve a huge thank you, not just because I work as an official, as an NPC IFBB stage expediter, so I work with the team of people who help put these shows on. That's just one component, but the point is, I get to see things from all angles, and I get to hear the conversations that most people don't get to hear. And what I do hear the most is people saying, how can we take care of these athletes? And I just love that. How blessed are we to have people like that in our industry who actually care? So, I know it's easy to complain. I know it's easy to get frustrated. And I know that when all of this stuff happens, the very first thing that people do is say, well, how does this affect me? But it's okay to have those thoughts, I guess. But you should also say, well, how does this affect this other person? How does this affect this promoter? And so I have reached out and sent a couple of messages to even promoters that I don't normally talk to, but I see them working very hard, not just to promote their show as a business, but to just make things happen. Promoters are promoting other promoters and other shows. That's just cool. It's just like a big team. So yeah, send them a message or just like a personal thank you. Or like if you are competing, don't be afraid to go up to a promoter and shake their hand and say, hey, thanks for what you did. I had a good experience. They probably need to hear that. Don't think that they don't need to hear that. I don't care. I don't care if it seems like everything is together. It never hurts to be appreciated. So, I don't know. I'm going to encourage you to do that. There's my 15-minute rant on thanking your promoters for today.